Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Rookie Card Collector 123 video. In today's video, I'm going to talk about, from beginning to end, my experience with one of the major auction houses in their most recent catalog auction. Excuse me. This is in no way a reflection of the auction house itself. I'm not going to have nothing bad to say about the auction house. There was no issues with the way the auction was run, the way the auction was handled, the material that was presented in the auction. Everything was great as usual. This auction house that I'm referring to is Robert Edward Auctions. And their recently closed auction over this past weekend, Sunday night, August 16th. I'm going to kind of describe from the opening of the auction from my standpoint, everything that I placed initial, what I call placeholder bids on, through the closing night, and what I was thinking for each one of these items, and ultimately what the results were. And at the end of the auction, I think you'll see why unfortunately I have to consider this one of my most disappointing major catalog auctions over the last 20 to 25 years that I've been bidding on these types of events. So going back to my normal process, any of the major catalog auctions, assuming there's items I'm interested in that are in there, my normal process is I usually wait for the catalog to come in the mail, just because I'd rather do that than have to scroll through 2,500 online listings. More screen time is definitely not a plus for me. My eyesight is not very good to begin with, and obviously wearing glasses easily causes headaches and that kind of stuff. So I wait for the catalog to come. So the auction is usually at least a week, sometimes 2 weeks even into the to the process by that point. So my REA catalog came a week or two after the auction opened, and I went through that day. And usually what I do is I rip out the pages of all the items I'm interested in. Then I go to the auction website, and one by one I start entering placeholder bids, which is basically one bid above what the current minimum is for every item that I'm interested in. And it could be a little scary for somebody who's new to the auction house forum, because you may start to wonder, gee, what if nobody else bids and I end up getting this card for my minimum bid price? And from my experience over 20 plus years, I don't think there was a single time that ever actually happened. So if you get your bids in early, the first week or so of bidding activity, that's kind of something that you might have in the back of your mind, but reality is basically it's never going to happen. You really don't need to worry about what if nobody else bids on something, unless it's just something so obscure that nobody else has any interest in it, then possibly I guess that could happen. But anyway, I'm going to take you through one by one all the items. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly so the video doesn't drag on forever. One by one, everything I bid on the opening day. And I'll say up front, a lot of these items, probably the majority, more than half of them, I really have no, I wouldn't say no desire to own the card, but the reality is, financially, I know I'm not going to be able to get it. But early on, the bidding's usually low enough that, it looks attractive. I put a bid in just in case something falls through the cracks by closing day. Because if you don't put a bid in before closing night, you're not eligible to participate once the extended bidding starts. So I'm going to read these off. So the first one I bid on was the 1888 Old Judge cataloged as N172, the Cap Anson portrait. There's not very many 19th century cards or players that I'm really interested in collecting. um, based on my current criteria and stuff I'm looking for. So one of the very few, maybe two or three 19th century guys I even bothered to look at cards at is Cap Anson. And I never had the old Judge card. I've had some of his other cards over the years. This one had a pretty bold image. Sometimes the images are light. And it's graded a PSA 2.5. I don't know if I just mentioned that or not. So I put in a placeholder bid. That was my first card. Second one was the 1904 Allegheny Christy Mathewson in a PSA 5. For those that are not familiar with the set, the Alleghenies was supposedly a test issue. It was for a playing card game. It only included National League players, and there's only one set known to exist. So every single player in there is a one of one. Honus Wagner's in the set, and Mathewson is probably the number 2 card in that set, and very close to his rookie year also, being 1904. Next one I put a bid in, 1910 E90-2 American Caramel Honus Wagner, PSA 1. That's one of the cards that I realistically had no chance to get, but put a bid in there just in case. Next one was a 1909 Ramley Square Jesse Burkett. That was an SGC 1.5. For those familiar with the Ramley set, the Ramley cards are pretty scarce in general. But besides the normal version, there are ones that instead of the player image appearing inside an oval on the card, there's a very few of them that were produced that appear in a square image. And the Jesse Burkett is one of those. Very few players out of the entire set were ever produced in a square frame, and Burkett was one of them. So a very rare one. I expected this one to be way out of my reach, but again, in the beginning, it was not that high. Number 5 was the 1909 M101-2 Eddie Collins. This one was a PSA 5, which was the highest graded. There's the next 3 items are all the exact same issue, 1909 M101-2 Eddie Collins. The only difference was the grades were a 5, a PSA 2, and a PSA 1.5. And the way I collect, there was zero reason for me to go after a PSA 5, where the price was going to be probably 5 times to maybe 10 times more than what the 1.5 or the 2 would sell for. So the 5 had really no interest to me. I just put in a bid just to watch it, really. Next one was another 1909 M101-2 Tris Speaker. This one was a PSA 3. That was also the highest graded. And both of those were rookie items, not rookie cards, because they're not cards. So that was my main interest in those. From there, we went to the 1910 M116. That's the Sporting Life, the blue background, Honus Wagner. Those have skyrocketed in the past couple of years. This was a BVG 6, so very unusual to find one of those in a Beckett holder. Centering was quite off, but otherwise looked like a really nice card. And in that grade, I pretty much knew for sure that was going to end up way beyond my means by the end, but put in a placeholder bid anyway. The next one was my number 1 card once I went through the whole catalog and the entire auction. It was the only card that was a quote-unquote must-have for me. And it's a card I've been looking for a couple of years. It's the 1910 Sepia Postcards, the one that pictures Ty Cobb and Honus Wagner shaking hands before the 1909 World Series. This one was in a PSA 2. The population on that was the total of 11 graded by PSA, and the 2 was almost the lowest. There's one of them graded a 1, and then there's I think 3 2s, and everything else is higher. So the PSA 2 is actually a lower grade for that card. And again, my number 1 target for the entire auction. Next one is a 1910 Novelty Cutlery Postcard, Honus Wagner. This is Wagner by himself. Same image as in the Sepia postcard set, which I already have a Wagner by himself, so this was not a big priority, but I put in a bid in the beginning anyway. This one was a PSA 1.5 and had some creasing in it, so never really expected to get that one. Next up was one that I thought was a sleeper, especially going into closing day. This was a 1914 Boston Garter, a Napoleon Lajoie. This one was graded SGC Authentic because of trimming. And the Boston Garters are super rare. There's actually 3 different versions of them. One was issued in 1912, and the other 2 were issued in 1914. The Lajoie in the auction was the version that is the least, I guess if you want to call it least valuable, but considering the other 2 versions are probably all at least 5-figure cards. This one, at least I was hoping, was going to stay in the 4 figures. So the Boston Garter Lajoie. Next up was the 1915 Cracker Jack Joe Jackson, and that was an SGC2. That was basically just a dream for me to put a bid in. Knew I was never going to have a chance to get that one. Next up was a 1917-20, the Felix Mendelssohn M101-6 Ty Cobb in an SGC2. That one was a possibility. I had some serious interest in it. I have another M1016, and I also, unfortunately, at the National passed up the chance because I didn't know it was there, but only one row over from where my booth was, where I was set up, there was a seller at the National who ended up selling a M101-6 Babe Ruth. And Just Collect owner Leighton Sheldon recently did a YouTube video, so you probably saw that already. Anyway, next one I have is a 1922 Olsen, which was a newly discovered card picturing Babe Ruth. That one is a PSA 2.5. That one I fully expected not to be able to reach, but put in an opening bid anyway. Uses the same image as the E120 and some of his other 1922 cards with the same front. Next one's actually another 1922 Babe Ruth with that same image as the Nielsen Chocolate. That one's also PSA 2.5. And that one I thought was somewhat of a realistic possibility, so I'm pretty interested in that one. Next up was a 1932 Fleer Gum Lefty Grove and a very high-grade SGC 8. Fleer Gum, I don't think I ever saw this card before. I don't even think it was cataloged in the old standard catalog of vintage baseball cards. If it was, I don't remember it. But very interesting card. I put in a placeholder bid. I found out one of my good friends in the hobby, who's a much bigger Lefty Grove collector than I am, was going to go after this, and so I just stayed out of the way on that one. It might have been something I could have been interested in, but probably not a real fit for my collection anyway. Next one was a 33 Gowdy Babe Ruth 144, the full body batting pose in a PSA 2. That one was a realistic possibility. They seem to be constantly selling for above current market value, which means that every time that happens, the market value is being raised. So, excuse me. So that was one that was a possibility for me, but likely was probably end up going for more than what I would want to spend. Not a tough card to find compared to a lot of these others I'm looking at. So next one is the 1937 O-Pee-Chee Joe DiMaggio. This is a very tough card, and I collect DiMaggio. I've got a few things. Not a major focus, and I figured this one's probably going to go pretty high. So I put in a bid. I followed it. I had some interest, but in the end, I figured it probably was not going to end up in my hands. Then the last 3 were the only post-war cards that I was involved with, and they were all 3 were Jackie Robinsons. and they were all 1947 Bond breads. Two of them were from the 13 card set. They were high grade ones for that issue. There was a PSA 4 and a PSA 5 MK. Both of those, I believe, were questionable as far as being issued in 47. I think they were issued later. So not really rookies. So my interest was minimal on those two, mainly because of that. And all the cards from that set seem to be going crazy, even more so than a lot of other Jackie Robinson stuff right now, which is all crazy. So really was not expecting any possibility on those two. And the final one was the 47 Bond bread, the rounded corners one, where he appears with all the other different players in the set. And it was an SGC 1.5. It was kind of miscut. Still got a 1.5 numerical grade because they don't do qualifiers like PSA. And PSA really doesn't grade those Bond bread rounded corner cards. So that was the last one that I had on my list from opening. So 22 bids altogether I put in the beginning of the auction. So now I'm going to fast forward to closing night, and I get my bid summary from REA emailed to me, as I have been getting every day, I think, since the auction opened. So I'm one by one, I'm going through. Now it's, closing night. What do I really need to focus on? Just as I suspected, almost the vast majority of the cards at this point were going to be out of my interest on closing night, so I was not going to have that many that I had to follow. So this is the point where I usually start looking up the stuff that still seems realistic. What are comps? What have they sold for? What am I thinking in today's market, the market being strong? So I'm figuring that into things as well, not just what the last sales were. So now I'm formulating a plan. And going into the last day, I was thinking there was going to be 3 cards that I, had a strong possibility of going after. And as it turned out, one of the 3, by the time extended bidding was going to start, I was already thought it was beyond what I wanted to spend. So that one, that one was out. So again, from the very beginning, I mentioned the Sepia postcard from 1910 with Wagner and Cobb was my number one target. Going into the closing, it was sitting at, I believe, $9,250 was the straight bid amount. So you got to tack on the buyer's premium. After looking at all the past results and the current state of the market and the fact that that's a PSA 2, which is one of the lowest graded for that particular card, even though the population number's only 11 for PSA. There's a few others graded by SGC as well. So I decide going in, again, that's going to be my number one target. It's a card I wanted for a couple of years. It's basically the same card as the Novelty Cutlery version, except the Novelty Cutlery is even rarer than the Sepia, which is the one I had a chance to get in REA now. So I came up with based on past results and market and everything. I'm figuring 15,000 is going to be pretty much my max, and that's going to include the buyer's premium on this one. So that's my number one target. My second target, based on where everything was at on closing day and which cards still had enough room for me to still put in a few more bids without being out already. Number 2 target ended up being the Boston Garter Nap Lajoie. My other third card that I was expecting going into the closing day might be a third target for me was the Allegheny Christy Mathewson. And that one I felt was already, by the time extended bidding started, it was already beyond what I wanted to spend. Not that I thought it was overpriced or anything. I think it was still quote unquote fair. It just, for how much I collect and how much I like Mathewson, the fact that it was 1904 and his rookie cards are from 1903, the W600 Sporting Life cabinet, and also the E107 Bryce Williams. The fact this was 1904 probably was more important to me than maybe a lot of other people. A lot of other people, the overwhelming factor is it's a 1-of-1, so it's the only Allegheny Mathewson that there is. And obviously, a chance of picking up that card is not going to come along very often. But anyway, I decided to stay away from the Mathewson. Basically, everything else was either way too much money out of my range, or just stuff that I didn't want badly enough. And again, I'm expecting hopefully to get the Cobb Wagner, and that was going to use a big chunk of my funds. And the fallback on that was if I didn't end up getting it, I was fully expecting to get the Lajoie based on where the bidding was. Unfortunately, an extended, excuse me. Unfortunately, an extended bidding, probably well, I shouldn't say that. Two cards that went up the most of everything I had on my list was the Cobb Wagner and the Lajoie Boston Garter, which was the worst thing that could have happened to my game plan. So, like I said, 15 was kind of my max on the Wagner Cobb. At the very beginning of extended bidding, we were pretty much at that level already. So things were not looking good. And I actually went one or two bids above that, just in the hopes I can get it if nobody else placed another bid. But again, like less than a half hour into extended bidding, we were beyond that point. It ended up selling for $23,000, which was almost 50% more than what I thought the value would be. Not only what I wanted to pay for it, but what I thought fair market value was for that card at that point. So obviously, I controlled myself. I bowed out and lost out on that one. The Lajoie, I was still in up until closer to midnight, but I was getting up to my max. I was figuring somewhere between 8,000 and 9,000 total, all in with buyer's premium and everything on the Lajoie. And by getting close to midnight, the card had reached 9,000. Which meant at that point, with the buyer's premium, now we're getting over 10. And based on past results and similar players, because there was not much in past Lajoie sales to go on for that card. So when it reached 10, I decided to just back down and let that one go. Excuse me. So both of my cards that I really had my heart set on winning in REA. I lost both. One thing I didn't mention, and it kind of sort of a consolation prize, I guess. Right before extended bidding started on Sunday night, I decided for some reason to put in a bid on the M101, one of the Eddie Collins, the M101-2 Sporting News supplements, the lowest grade one, the PSA 1.5. And I figured I'll put one bid in. If somebody outbids me, I'm not going to bother with it. It's just sort of a last second decision. So I put the one bid in, and of course that would be the one item through extended bidding nobody else would ever place a bid on. And I ended up getting it for, I think it was $675. So all in with the buyer's premium, I think it costs me about $830 or something like that with shipping and all. So that was my one item I got out of the auction. In the end, after losing out on the two cards I really wanted, I kind of felt like almost like that was a waste. And, had I known that was going to be the final outcome, I most likely would have never even bothered to put a bid in on that Eddie Collins. Now it just felt like a burden. I had to, write a check and mail it in for this card, that I didn't really care all that much about compared to the others that I missed out on. But anyway, as I mentioned in the very beginning, the auction results, not the auction house or the process or the material, everything was first rate. So nothing bad to say about any of that, just the results and the way it ended for me was very disappointing. And what makes it even more disappointing in today's collecting world, if you're collecting pre-war, and I'm not even going to get into the price of everything and how much costs have gone up and that kind of stuff. I'm going to stay away from all that. That's a whole nother thing by itself. But just the fact that, there's 11 of these PSA graded Wagner Cobb postcards, and I haven't seen one come up on eBay probably since COVID, when I got back into collecting vintage again. And I have not seen the novelty cutlery come up, I don't think since COVID either. One of these came up, the Sepia set also, the Cobb Wagner came up maybe a year ago to 2 years ago in an auction. It ended up being the PSA 1, which was the one lower graded than the 2 that was in this auction. And I bid on it. It had a couple of creases. I figured I would probably be better off, instead of getting it and then trying to upgrade later on, maybe just wait until I get the copy that I would be a better fit for my collection. So I ended up making a token play for it, but ended up more or less just bowing out pretty easily. And again, in hindsight, I think the card, the PSA 2 in this auction, was definitely the card I'd much rather have. And of course, anything higher than that is probably going to go for a lot more money than that. So who knows if I'll ever get one. But what I was starting to say was, in the past, you could wait, and eventually a lot of these type of things would come up on eBay. A lot of times there's a buy it now, and if you're willing to pay, sometimes above market if you have to, you can get those and not risk going through the auction process and possibly losing out. But nowadays, it seems like all the rare, big name, big cards, high dollar stuff, everything, getting closer and closer to 100% is winding up in auction house catalogs. And they're not available on eBay. They're not available at local card shows. They're not available at the national or regional shows. Everything is big auction house. And excuse me. If you don't have the money, the funds to compete with the big boys in some of these auctions, in today's market, you're like me, you're going to wind up disappointed probably a lot of the time, is the reality, I think. And I'm talking only a day after this auction happened. My disappointment is still fresh. I'll get over it, as time goes by. Maybe I'll get that card at some point, maybe I won't. But anyway, wanted to share my thoughts kind of, from the beginning, from opening bids to the final day closing. My thoughts on what I was thinking as I was bidding and making final decisions on these cards. And just to share and maybe help other people, or maybe other people have kind of come to the same conclusions like me, been in the same situation as well. So anyway, hope you enjoyed today's video. Have a great day, and I'll catch you guys again on the next one.